So it's about that time. We have to sit down and have the talk. You're scared to buy a Porsche, specifically a 986 Boxster or 996 911, because you've heard the horror stories of people on the forums talking about the IMS bearing. Oh, it grenaded my motor. Now I got to spend $10,000 to either fix my motor or get a new one. And you should probably do some research before you listen to everybody on the forums. Because if I had listened to everybody on the forums, I would have drilled holes into my exhaust muffler because of the Krios mod to make it louder. Don't do that. I'm going to try and explain to you what the IMS is and why you shouldn't be bothered by the IMS and why you definitely should buy a 986 Boxster or a 996 911, whichever one you prefer, doesn't matter. You should go into it knowing that, yes, that is a potential problem, but it shouldn't scare you from one of the greatest driving cars that have ever been made. So let's go ahead and start from the beginning. What is an IMS? IMS stands for intermediate shaft bearing, which is a bearing that sits on the intermediate shaft. The intermediate shaft sits on the center of the flat six motor that's sitting right behind me, and it holds the timing chain in place. Well, the bearing sits on the intermediate shaft and acts as a bearing. So I'm actually not 100% in tune with this as well. I've read some articles, but correct me if I'm wrong. Definitely, if you guys know more than I do, put it in the comments. I want this to be an informational video for everybody, not a video that you're like, oh, you don't know shit about the IMS. Why are you making a video? Well, inform me then. Go ahead and put it in the comments, because then I'll learn, and then people who will watch this video will learn. So that's like the very basic note of what the IMS does. And the IMS is sort of the Achilles heel to the 986 and the 996 Porsches. This motor is known in Porsche lingo as a water-cooled motor. So before Porsche went to water-cooled in 97 or 98, when the Boxster came out, they used motors what were known as the air-cooled motors, or the Mezger flat six motors. Mezger being the person that created the motor. So many people, put those motors on pedestals, holy grails. Those are the greatest motors. And yeah, they're great motors, but that doesn't make the water-cooled motors terrible just because of that, one problem that they have. There are many motors out there that have problems as well. The BMW M5 and M6 V10s love to throw rod bearings, Vanos pumps. So, it's not just about this motor. It's about, yeah, every motor out there has some kind of a problem that, is specific to it. This just happens to be very expensive because it's a Porsche. But now that, I went off track on that. As I was saying, when they switched to the water-cooled motors, Porsche actually, put this bearing onto the intermediate shaft. The shaft has been in place on the Mezger flat sixes as well. It just didn't have that bearing. Or, like I said, correct me if I'm wrong. That's just what I just read online. So after they moved to that, they actually left the 911 turbo motors, the 911 GT3 motor, and the 911 GT2 motors. Those do not have the IMS bearing issues. Those are still based off the old school Mezger platform, so they don't have the problems that these motors have. Now that I've very crudely, and you could tell I am very inexperienced with Porsches, have tried to explain to you what the IMS is, let me kind of explain to you what happens if you don't take care of it. So Porsche and then everybody on the forums, they recommend that you replace the IMS bearing every time you do a clutch. So when you replace your clutch, you do the IMS bearing. It's like preventative maintenance. If you don't, and the IMS goes bad, it pretty much grenades the motor. Your motor goes out of time because, as I said, the intermediate shaft holds the timing chain. So the motor goes out of time, and if anybody knows what happens when motors, go out of time, or like if you have a timing belt, if you snap a timing belt, if you have an interference motor, and these motors are interference, bad things happen. Pistons touch valves and they kiss, and not good things happen. Very bad things happen. It grenades the motor, and then you're left with two options. You rebuild the motor, you strip it down to the block, you strip it down to the block, you pretty much, if the pistons are bad, new pistons, new valves, maybe new cylinder heads, depending on if the machine shop's good enough and they can fix them, and then you put it back together. Or you buy a used one, and I've looked online for my specific car. If you guys don't know, if this is your first time viewing my channel, I have a 2003 986 Boxster S with 3.2 flat six. Motors for this vehicle used with like reasonable miles tend to go for like $3,000 or $4,000. Now, factor that you're going to do that. If your car's a stick shift, you're definitely going to do the clutch, because you might as well do the clutch while you have the whole thing taken apart. Clutch, rear main seal, because also preventative maintenance, it's already out, you might as well do it. Anything else that motor needs, so if something's leaking, place that, might as well while it's out of the vehicle. And labor, you're gonna have to pay somebody to do it, unless you're an expert do-it-yourself mechanic and you somehow do it yourself, which, me, I will probably try to do it myself, and I'll film it for you guys when I try to replace the IMS bearing, whenever that is. And it's gonna be a really fun project. Or I said that now, but I already know it's gonna turn into a lot of cussing, yelling, throwing tools, getting mad, and yeah. So factor in another, if you take it to a person that knows what they're doing with Porsches, probably factor in another, I would say maybe $2,000 for labor, maybe less. I got a quote at a Porsche Technic shop here in Las Vegas that specializes in nothing but Porsches, and they told me they do IMS bearings for $3,200 and some change. So $3,200 to do the IMS bearing and the clutch on these cars. So it's actually not that bad. If this is a car you're gonna keep for forever or for a long time, definitely do it. But I kind of want to transition into the why I don't think people should really be scared of the IMS, why people blow it out of proportion. So here's my thought process. And now, you guys have probably already destroyed me in the comments. You don't know shit about the IMS. And I mean, if I don't, go ahead and, like I said, correct me in the comment section. That's, that's a very crude description of what I have read about the IMS. But now I'm going to transition into my opinion on the IMS. So this part, you can try and, roast me in the comments, but I'll probably roast you back, because this is my opinion and this is what I believe. And if you agree with me, great. If you don't, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. So go ahead and put it down there. Do I care about the IMS? I mean, am I scared of it? No, not really. I mean, yeah, there's always that a little bit of fear, that I have in the back of my head that, hey, the IMS, I really need to do it. My car's at 90,000 miles. I should probably do it. Yeah, but think about it. If you keep that in the back of your mind, every time you get in this car, you're gonna be like, well, what if it blows up? What if the IMS decides to go right now? I'm gonna be stuck on the side of the road. I'm gonna have a $10,000 repair bill. Those are the kind of things I don't want to have when I'm driving my car. I love driving this car. This car is fantastic. And if I keep thinking about, oh, maybe this time I drive it, it's gonna blow up, you're gonna stop driving the car. You're gonna get scared and you're gonna park it in the garage, and it's gonna sit there for who knows how long, and then it's gonna break, because cars break when they sit for a long time. Don't, yeah, it's definitely something you should take care of, and it's definitely something that needs to be replaced, but don't let it get to the point that you're scared to drive your car. That is the worst thing that you can do. Don't start overthinking about it and then stop driving your car. These cars are meant to be driven. Like I said, whether you have the 986 Boxster, whether you have a 911, 996, it doesn't matter. And by the way, this doesn't just affect the 986 Boxsters. This also affects the 987 Caymans and Boxsters up to a certain engine code. I believe it's up to like 08 or 09 when they redesigned it. So then it's different, because I believe they redesigned it to be a 3.4 or something like that. So it's a redesigned motor, so they don't have the IMS problems anymore. And I believe it also is the similar with 997. I could be wrong. I didn't do research on the 997. But yeah, it's not something that you should be scared of. I mean, definitely, if you can, do it so it's, it's been replaced and you don't have to worry about it. But if you don't, if you don't want to spend that kind of money right now because you only drive your car a few times, a week, or maybe a few times a month, then don't. It's not something to be worried about. It's not, you know, people make it such a big deal out of the IMS bearing is going to blow up and you're going to be stuck with a $10,000 bill. Okay. So, I mean, if you actually read online and you read from actual Porsche techs, a lot of them say that the IMS, they've rarely seen it go bad. I mean, yeah, it happens. Of course it happens. It goes bad. But a lot of these techs say, don't worry about it. You know, there are some preventative things you can do, and there are telltale signs that will show you if you need to replace it. And I'm going to describe this to you right now. The first thing you should do that you know your IMS is going bad, if you do an oil change, every time look through the oil and look through the oil filter. If you see metal shavings in there, the IMS is going bad. At that point, stop driving the vehicle and, you know, get it towed to a shop or whatever you're going to do with it and just, you know, get it replaced. At that point. The second thing you should do, if you hear some kind of knocking or rattling noise that's coming from the rear, from the motor specifically, then you should probably also stop driving the car. Whether that's the IMS or it's something else, if your motor's knocking, please don't drive the vehicle. You're only going to make it worse. Just don't. If it's knocking, if it's making any serious noise, don't drive it. Tow it to a shop, or if you're a competent mechanic, diagnose it, see what's going on. But don't just say, oh, forget it, I'm just gonna redline it and maybe that'll fix it. The Italian tune-up doesn't fix everything. It may fix some things, but it doesn't fix everything. So don't do that. But the last telltale sign is if you get an oil leak from where the main seal would usually be. So, which is between the engine and the transmission, it's where it connects. If you start getting oil like leaking on the ground wherever you park the car, that might be a telltale sign that the bearing's going bad. Most of the time, it's probably going to be the rear main seal. But if you see that, just be cautious that it could be your bearing. Now, why does the bearing go bad? Well, if you guys don't know how bearings work, you know, like in your wheel bearings or hub bearings or whatever, the way Porsche did it, they looped up the bearing with the grease once. That was when they installed the motor. That's it. That bearing does not get oil in it. Well, sometimes the reason it goes bad is because oil goes in there and it washes away the grease, so then there's nothing to lube it. But what I'm trying to say is that grease, after, like, my car is now 18 years old. That's 18 years of the motor heating up, heating down, heating up, heating down, red line, driving it fast, doing this, taking corners. So the bearing's going to start wearing out. It's a thing that wears out. It's like I said, it's like the hub bearings. They wear out. So yeah, you definitely should replace the IMS bearing because it will go bad. It's a piece that goes bad. It's like brakes. They will go bad. But it's not something that, it's not as big as everybody makes it out to be. Now, you know, that goes bad. The bearing gets dried out, whatever, breaks up, and then it causes catastrophic damage. Which I'm not trying to scare you guys. Like I said, don't worry too much because then you'll stop driving your vehicle. And the last thing you want to do is stop driving this vehicle. So those are kind of the three, the three things. I know I went on a little rant again about don't worry about it. But now preventative things that you can do that I've read, you know, from like Porsche techs and people that work on these cars. A lot of people say to do oil changes between 3,000 to 5,000 miles. Don't do 10,000 mile oil changes. That's just stupid. But preferably 3,000 to 5,000. I do it every 3,000 miles. I use liquid moly. It's a German oil. I use 5W40, and you know that's pretty much all I use. I do it every 3,000 miles. And I've only done 2 oil changes on the car so far because I've only put like 5,000 miles on it since I bought it. So the first time I did an oil change when I first bought it, and then I did one after 5,000 miles, which, yeah, you know, I waited till 5,000 miles. But I did the oil change, and thankfully, there's no wood in here, so I'm gonna knock on my head. There was no metal shavings in the filter or in the oil. The oil was very clean. It looked very good. Didn't smell like anything. Didn't smell bad. But yeah, I mean, you know, I know the video's getting kind of, you know, about 15 minutes. I don't want to make it too long because then people stop watching. But one thing I want to leave you guys off with, don't listen to other people's opinions online. That you should do research before you start trusting people. And that includes me too. Just because you're watching my video doesn't mean I'm, you know, the end all be all. Definitely after watching this, go read up on the IMS bearing and then decide if it's something you want to embark on. Because that shouldn't be something that prevents you from buying an awesome car like this. You know, these cars are awesome, and this motor is reliable aside from the IMS bearing. I haven't really read anything else that's bad with these motors. Porsche makes good motors. They make, you know, they know what they're doing. So don't let the IMS bearing scare you from buying one of the greatest driving cars that I've personally ever driven. And yeah, obviously there's, you know, better driving cars, the newer GT Porsches and, you know, the Lamborghini Performantes and whatever. They're great cars. You know, there are many great driving cars out there, but I consider this to be one of the best, one of the best among the others, because, you know, until you've driven a naturally aspirated flat six Porsche with a manual transmission, you haven't lived. Because the way this car sounds at 7,000 RPM, the way it handles in corners, the way it drives is like nothing else. And like I've said, the Boxster drives differently from a 911 because the 911 is the Boxster is mid-engine, the 911 is rear-engine. So you get a little bit of differences. But back to, I go on tangents and I apologize for that. But the IMS bearing, don't be scared of the IMS bearing. It's not something that should be the end-all be-all about why you shouldn't buy one of the greatest, you know, driving cars that have ever been made. And I mean, I guess I'm going to close the video out here. You know, I definitely want to know what you guys think about it. Let me know in the comment section. I'm sure there's going to be people that are going to be like, you don't know shit about the IMS. This is a terrible video. You don't know anything. And like I said, put it in the comment section. I definitely would love to read your comments, and you know, it'll be something I'm going to learn new. And for the people that have never heard of the IMS, also, we're going to read up and they're going to hear, you know, what it is, and they'll learn, and then they'll make their mind up whether they want to buy one of these cars and have to do that at some point. Because I'm going to be doing that at some point. Everybody's, you know, if you own one of these, you're going to have to do an IMS bearing at some point. And I've heard people that have Boxsters at 130,000 miles with you know, a factory IMS bearing from whenever the car was new. So it just shows that, you know, there's been cars that have blown up at 40,000 miles, and there's cars that are still going at 130,000 miles and they have the original IMS. It just shows that the way the car's been maintained, the way you maintain the car, and the way you drive the car is how you're going to keep the IMS from going kaboom. So let me just leave you guys off with that. You know, I hope all of you guys have a great day. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and like it, and again, let me know in the comments what your opinions are on the IMS. Am I wrong on it? Should you actually be really worried about it? Let me know in the comments, and we could definitely go back and forth and discuss that, because I would love to discuss it with anybody. You know, if you're a first-time Porsche owner like me, or if you've owned many of these Porsches in the past, go ahead and let me know. You know, what do you guys think? You guys all have a great day.